She came home after her accident, found her mother and her daughter frozen and locked outside by rich husband. The bedroom grew cold first. Grant cited stress, big deals, investor pressures. Months passed without him reaching for her. When she tried to initiate, he'd pat her shoulder like she was a child. Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's dream instead of your own? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The woman who survived a near-fatal crash discovered the Real accident was trusting her husband. 3 months of fighting for her life in a Phoenix hospital, only to come home and find her 7-year-old daughter shivering on a frozen porch, while her millionaire husband sat inside, sipping wine, watching them suffer through the window. Imagine surviving death itself, only to discover the person you trusted most wanted you gone. Have you ever trusted someone completely? Have you ever felt safe in your own home? Have you ever believed someone when they said, "I'll take care of everything"? What happens when the person who vowed to protect you becomes your greatest threat? Stay with me as we uncover how a woman's worst nightmare became her greatest awakening. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to steal your life, this story will shake you to your core. Hit that notification bell, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about betrayal. Let me take you back to where the fairy tale began and where it all went wrong. She thought marrying money meant security, until the night she realized wealth could be the most dangerous prison of all. Birmingham, Alabama never felt smaller than the day Vanessa packed her beat-up Honda for Texas. 22 years old with nursing school dreams and $50 in her wallet. Her mama Ruby worked double shifts at the diner just to keep their lights on after Daddy died. Vanessa swore she'd build something better. The Austin Tech Conference changed everything. Vanessa was there on a nursing scholarship, learning about medical technology. Grant Whitaker commanded the room like he owned it, which he practically did. Connecticut money, family resort empire, designer everything. But when he talked to her, his voice got softer. Different. "You're not like the others," he said over champagne she couldn't pronounce. "You actually listen." 2 weeks later, he flew her to Napa Valley. Private jet, 5-star everything. Wine that cost more than Ruby's monthly rent. Vanessa felt like Cinderella, except this prince wore $1,000 watches and talked about changing the world through software. "I want to take care of you," Grant whispered that first night, his hands gentle on her face. "You've worked so hard. Let me make life easy for you." The proposal came 6 months later. Diamond bigger than anything she'd ever seen, restaurant overlooking the Austin skyline, photographer he'd secretly hired. Every woman's dream, right? Ruby flew out for the wedding, looking uncomfortable in the fancy dress Vanessa bought her. "Something feels off about him, baby," Ruby whispered while they fixed Vanessa's veil. "Rich men don't usually fall this hard this fast." "He loves me, Mama. He wants to build a life together." But Ruby's eyes stayed worried. The Scottsdale mansion gleamed like something from a movie. Glass walls, infinity pool, guest rooms bigger than their old apartment. Vanessa walked through those marble halls feeling grateful, but somehow empty. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Grant handled the move, the decorating, even picking out her clothes. "You have such simple taste," he'd say, replacing her Target finds with designer pieces. "Let me show you how beautiful you can be." When Mia was born, Vanessa thought the missing piece had finally clicked into place. Their daughter had Grant's green eyes and Vanessa's stubborn chin. The nursery looked like a princess palace. Hand-painted walls, imported furniture, toys that cost more than most people's cars. "Now you don't need to work," Grant said, bouncing baby Mia. "I'll take care of everything. My girls deserve the best." Vanessa quit nursing. The days stretched long in the mansion. Ruby visited when she could afford the flight, but Grant always found reasons to cut the trip short. "She makes me feel watched," he complained after Ruby left early for Mia's first Christmas. "Like I'm not good enough for her daughter. She's just protective. She raised me alone after." I know the story. Poor girl from Alabama, dead daddy, struggling mama. But that's not your life anymore, Vanessa. You're a Whitaker now. The name felt heavy on her tongue. Staff handled the cooking, cleaning, shopping. Vanessa's days blurred together. yoga classes with women who talked about charity galas, lunch dates that felt more like auditions for friendship, evenings waiting for Grant to come home from work that seemed to consume him completely. The bedroom grew cold first. Grant cited stress, big deals, investor pressures. Months passed without him reaching for her. When she tried to initiate, he'd pat her shoulder like she was a child. "Not tonight, baby. My mind's elsewhere." Vanessa started staying up late, watching me asleep, feeling like a visitor in her own life. The mansion had everything except warmth. Every room echoed. Every surface reflected back her loneliness. Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's dream instead of your own? Drop a comment if you've ever felt controlled by someone's generosity. Ruby's visits became battles. Grant would find fault with everything. Her luggage in the foyer, her voice too loud at dinner, her questions about his business. After one particularly tense weekend, Ruby pulled Vanessa aside. "He's changing you, honey. You used to laugh. You used to fight for things you believed in. I'm happy, Mama. We have everything we need. Do you? Or do you have everything he thinks you need?" The question followed Vanessa through empty days in her perfect prison. She caught herself staring out those floor-to-ceiling windows, watching other people's lives happen beyond the glass. Mothers walking their children to school, neighbors chatting over fences, real life happening everywhere except inside her beautiful cage. Grant's phone started buzzing with texts he'd delete before she could see. Late meetings became overnight trips. The man who once couldn't bear to be away from her now seemed relieved when she went to bed early. One night, she heard him on the phone in his office. The door was cracked just enough. "Once she's out of the picture, everything will be simpler." Vanessa convinced herself he meant her nursing career, the part of her that still wanted to work. She was wrong about a lot of things back then, but she'd learn the truth soon enough. As Vanessa held newborn Mia in the hospital, Grant's phone buzzed with a text from Claire. He deleted it before she could see, but the damage was already done. The countdown to betrayal had begun. The perfect husband started disappearing long before the accident. First emotionally, then physically, finally completely. 2 years into marriage, Vanessa realized she was living with a stranger who wore her husband's face. Grant controlled every dollar that flowed through their house, every decision that shaped their days. She had credit cards with her name, but his approval required for anything over $100. "It's just smart money management," he'd explain when she questioned the restrictions. "I handle the business side, so you can focus on being a mom." But being a mom meant asking permission to buy Mia new clothes when she outgrew the old ones. It meant justifying grocery purchases and explaining why she needed gas money to drive to the pediatrician. The golden cage had invisible chains, but they were still chains. Ruby's visits became rare events requiring weeks of negotiation. Grant complained about the guest room being occupied, the routine being disrupted, the way Ruby looked at him like she could see through his expensive suits to something ugly underneath. "Your mother doesn't trust me," he said one evening after Ruby had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion, but really just avoiding another tense dinner. "She's protective. She raised me alone after Daddy died. She doesn't trust easy. Well, maybe she shouldn't visit so much. This is our home, not a boarding house." The word stung because home was supposed to be where family felt welcome. Instead, their mansion felt like a museum where Ruby was afraid to touch anything expensive, where her Alabama accent seemed too loud, where simple clothes looked shabby against marble and crystal. Grant's work consumed him like a disease. 12-hour days became 14-hour days, became overnight trips to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle. Cities where his software company was expanding, he claimed. Cities where Vanessa couldn't follow because someone needed to stay home with Mia. "You understand, right, baby? This is all for us. For our future." But their present felt like walking through fog. Grant came home exhausted, distracted, checking his phone constantly even during Mia's bedtime stories. The man who once hung on Vanessa's every word now seemed annoyed when she tried to share her day. Their bedroom became a wasteland of unspoken tension. Grant slept on his side, back turned to her, phone charging on his nightstand where it buzzed with messages at all hours. When Vanessa reached for him, He'd mumble about being tired, stressed, dealing with difficult investors. Maybe we should talk to someone, Vanessa suggested one morning after another night of sleeping inches apart, but feeling miles away. Talk to someone? About what? We don't have problems, Vanessa. I'm building an empire here. That takes sacrifice. Sacrifice. The word echoed through her thoughts. What exactly was she sacrificing? Her career, her independence, her sense of self. All for a marriage that felt more like a business arrangement where she was an employee with benefits. The mansion's marble floors echoed with emptiness despite being filled with luxury. Vanessa's footsteps sounded hollow as she wandered rooms that felt more like a museum than a home. Beautiful but lifeless, expensive but cold. Mia became her anchor to sanity. 3 years old with Grant's green eyes and her own stubborn spirit, chattering about everything and nothing while they played in the pristine playroom Grant had designed but never entered. "Where's Daddy?" Mia would ask during dinner when his chair sat empty again. "Working, sweetheart. Daddy works very hard for our family." But doubt crept in like Arizona heat through window cracks. Did he work for their family? Or did their family just happen to exist in the background of his real priorities? The staff noticed things Vanessa pretended not to see. Maria, the housekeeper, would glance away when Grant snapped at Vanessa over trivial things. James, the groundskeeper, looked uncomfortable when Grant criticized Vanessa's parenting within earshot. They were paid to be invisible, but their eyes held sympathy that made Vanessa feel exposed. When someone stops touching you, stops seeing you, stops caring, how long do you wait before you realize it's not about them being busy? Share your experience below. Ruby's phone calls became lifelines to reality outside the mansion's walls. Every Sunday at 7, Vanessa would take her cell phone to the guest room and close the door. "How are you really doing, baby?" "Fine, Mama. Everything's fine." But Ruby heard the strain in her voice, the careful way Vanessa chose words, the silences that stretched too long. "Fine isn't happy, honey. Fine is just surviving." Surviving. That's exactly what it felt like. Getting through each day in a house that had everything except joy. Married to a man who provided everything except love. The night before everything changed, Vanessa found Grant in his office after midnight. Door cracked just enough for his voice to carry. She'd come downstairs for water, heard him talking low and urgent. "Once she's out of the picture, everything will be simpler." Her blood turned to ice water. She pressed against the wall, heart hammering. No, not divorce. Too messy, too expensive. There are other ways to handle problems that won't cooperate. Vanessa's hand shook as she backed away from the door, bare feet silent on cold marble. She convinced herself he meant her nursing job, the way she sometimes talked about going back to work. He wanted her focused on home, not outside interests. She was wrong. About everything. The night before the accident, Vanessa overheard Grant on the phone. "Once she's out of the picture, everything will be simpler." She convinced herself he meant her nursing job. She was wrong. Sometimes God saves your life just so you can see who is praying for you to die. January in Phoenix felt like autumn anywhere else, but that night carried winter's bite. Rain hammered the city like bullets, turning familiar highways into rivers of danger. Vanessa gripped the steering wheel of her BMW, Grant's choice, not hers, as she drove home from a rare dinner with her old nursing school friend Sarah. "You seem different," Sarah had said over drinks. "Quieter, like you're walking on eggshells. Marriage changes you. Motherhood changes you. It shouldn't erase you." The words followed Vanessa onto I-10, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against sheets of rain. She'd left the restaurant early, claiming Mia needed her bedtime routine. Truth was, Grant had texted 3 times asking where she was, when she'd be home, why dinner was taking so long. The semi-truck appeared out of nowhere, hydroplaning across 2 lanes like a runaway train. Vanessa jerked the wheel left, felt her car lift off the pavement, time stretching like taffy as the world spun sideways. The guardrail rushed toward her with the inevitability of fate, metal meeting metal in a symphony of destruction that should have been her finale. Rain hammered the windshield like bullets as Vanessa's car spun across 3 lanes of I-10. The guardrail rushed toward her with the inevitability of fate, metal meeting metal in a symphony of destruction that should have been her finale. Darkness swallowed everything. She woke up 3 days later to the steady beep of machines keeping her alive. Phoenix General Hospital's ICU smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. Her left leg was pinned with metal hardware. Her ribs were cracked. Her skull had fractures the doctors called miraculous because they hadn't killed her. "You're one lucky lady," Dr. Martinez said, checking her chart. "Brain injury could have been catastrophic. As it is, you'll need months of rehabilitation to walk normally again." Grant appeared in the doorway, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than the hospital bill. His face carried the appropriate concern, but his eyes held something else. Something that looked almost like disappointment. "Thank God you're alive," he said, but his voice sounded hollow. Rehearsed. The next 3 months blurred together in a haze of physical therapy, pain medication, and slow progress toward walking again. Grant visited twice a week, always impeccably dressed, always checking his phone, always leaving early for meetings that couldn't wait. "How's Mia?" Vanessa would ask, desperate for details about her daughter's life. "Fine. Ruby's handling everything. The nanny helps when needed." Ruby. Her mother had flown out within hours of the accident, moving into the guest room to care for Mia, while Vanessa fought for her life. Grant never mentioned how that arrangement was working, never complained about Ruby's presence the way he used to. Looking back, Vanessa should have wondered why. The doctors called it a miracle. 3 months of grueling rehabilitation, learning to walk again, fighting for each breath. What they didn't know was that surviving the crash would be the easy part. Physical therapy became her religion. Every painful step on the treadmill, every agonizing stretch of torn muscles, every small victory in regaining balance. It all fed her determination to get home to Mia, to resume the life that had been interrupted but not destroyed. "Your progress is remarkable," the physical therapist said during Vanessa's final week. "Most patients with your injuries take twice as long to reach this level of mobility. I have a daughter waiting for me." That's powerful motivation. Grant's visits became shorter and more infrequent as Vanessa improved. He cited business pressures, investor meetings, the demands of running a growing company. But his assistant called more often than he did, relaying messages about discharge plans and home care arrangements. "He's under tremendous stress," the assistant explained when Vanessa questioned Grant's absence. "The company's going through some difficult transitions right now." Transitions, another word that would take on sinister meaning later. The night before discharge, Vanessa called home to talk to Mia. Ruby answered, voice strained. "Hey baby, how you feeling?" "Better. Excited to come home tomorrow. Can I talk to Mia?" A pause. Then Ruby's careful words. "She's already asleep, honey. Had a long day." But Vanessa could hear Mia giggling in the background, heard Grant's voice sharp and low, heard a door slam. Ruby's breathing quickened. "Mama, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Just focus on getting better. We'll see you tomorrow." The line went dead. Vanessa stared at her phone, uneasiness crawling up her spine like cold fingers. Something was wrong at home. She could feel in the spaces between Ruby's words and the tension that it carried through the phone line. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? A split second that divided your life into before and after? Tell me about your turning point. That final night in the hospital, Vanessa dreamed of home. Not the mansion with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, but the small apartment where she'd grown up with Ruby, where love lived in every cramped corner, where family meant safety, where coming home felt like putting on your favorite sweater. She woke before dawn, packed her few belongings, and waited for Grant to pick her up. The discharge nurse wheeled her to the hospital entrance, where January air bit through her jacket. But Grant's car wasn't waiting in the circle drive. Instead, a taxi idled by the curb. The driver looked at his phone. "You Vanessa Whitaker? Your husband said to take you home." He got held up in a meeting. On the day his wife came home from 3 months in the hospital after nearly dying. As Vanessa took her first steps without assistance, Grant stood in the hospital corridor on his phone. She's getting stronger. We need to move faster. The woman fighting to live had no idea someone was planning her social death. He promised to take care of everything while she healed, and he did by taking everything that mattered away from her. The taxi ride home felt like traveling through a stranger's life. Phoenix sprawled outside the windows, familiar but changed, like seeing your childhood bedroom after years away. Everything looked smaller, less important, viewed through the lens of almost dying. Vanessa's hands shook as they turned into the circular driveway. Home. The mansion rose before her like a monument to someone else's dreams. All glass and steel and perfect landscaping that required an army of staff to maintain. She'd once felt proud pulling into this driveway. Now it felt like entering a museum where she was just another exhibit. The driver helped her with a single bag that held 3 months of hospital life. Pajamas, slippers, get-well card from people she barely remembered. Everything that mattered. Her recovery, her determination, her gratitude for being alive couldn't fit in luggage. You sure you're okay, lady? You look pale. I'm Phoenix. Just been away for a while. Away. Like she'd been on vacation instead of fighting for her life. The front door stood closed. Strange. Ruby always left it unlocked during the day, said it felt more welcoming. Vanessa reached for her keys, then remembered she'd lost them in the accident. Her purse, her phone, her identification, all destroyed in twisted metal and broken glass. She pressed the doorbell of her own home. No answer. She pressed it again, longer this time. Through the frosted glass panels, she could see movement inside. Someone was home. Why weren't they answering? The door finally opened to reveal Grant, wine glass in hand, looking annoyed at the interruption. Behind him, soft jazz played from the sound system. Candles flickered on the dining room table set for 2. You should have called, he said, not moving aside to let her enter. I wasn't expecting you until later. The hospital discharged me early. I tried calling, but you didn't answer. Grant glanced back toward the dining room, then stepped aside with obvious reluctance. Well, you're here now. I suppose we'll have to adjust plans. Plans. Vanessa followed his gaze to the table set with their good china, expensive wine breathing in a crystal decanter, flowers that hadn't been there during any of his hospital visits. Plans that clearly didn't include his wife coming home. Where's Mia? And Mama? Mia's at a sleepover. Ruby went to the grocery store. But Vanessa could hear the shower running upstairs. Female laughter echoing from the master bedroom. The bedroom she'd shared with Grant until the accident made her an inconvenient reminder of life's fragility. Who's upstairs? Grant's jaw tightened. Just the cleaning service. They're finishing up. The cleaning service that came on Wednesdays. It was Friday. Vanessa moved toward the staircase. Her walking still unsteady, but her determination solid. Grant caught her arm. You should rest. You've had a long day. Why don't you use the guest room tonight? The guest room. In her own house. Because the master bedroom was occupied by cleaning services that laughed like women enjoying private jokes. I want to see Mia. I told you. She's at a friend's house. Jenny something. You don't know the family. Of course, she didn't know Mia's friends' families. She'd been gone for 3 months, and before that, she'd been isolated in this mansion like a butterfly pinned to a board. Beautiful, on display, but unable to fly. The mansion that once welcomed Ruby with warmth now felt like enemy territory. Doors that had always been open suddenly required keys she didn't have, while shadows moved behind windows where strangers seemed to belong. Grant poured himself more wine, didn't offer any to his wife, who'd just returned from the hospital. The same wife he'd promised to love in sickness and in health. The sickness part was over. The health part seemed to make him nervous. We need to talk about some changes, he said, settling into his leather chair, like a king addressing a peasant. While you were away, I had time to think about our situation. Our situation, like her near-death experience, was a mutual inconvenience they needed to manage together. What kind of changes? Well, for starters, Ruby can't stay here indefinitely. This isn't a retirement home for your family. She's caring for Mia, our daughter. Mia has a nanny. She doesn't need your mother hovering around, filling her head with ideas about things. What things? Grant's eyes went cold. Ideas about how I'm not good enough. How we don't need this house, this lifestyle. Your mother never approved of our marriage. True, but Ruby's disapproval had been about Grant's character, not his bank account. She'd seen through the charm to something calculating underneath. Vanessa wished she'd listened. The shower stopped running upstairs. Footsteps moved across the hardwood floors of her bedroom. High heels on wood. The cleaning service wore heels now, apparently. And there's something else. Grant set down his wine, leaning forward like he was about to deliver good news. I've been thinking about Mia's education. She's getting older, needs structure, discipline. I found an excellent boarding school in Connecticut. Boarding school? She's 7 years old, almost 8, and the Whitaker women have always attended Fairfield Academy. It's tradition. Whitaker women. Like Vanessa was already dead and Mia was being raised by relatives who'd generously taken in an orphan. What would you do if you suspected someone was betraying your loved one while they were helpless? Would you speak up or gather evidence? Share your thoughts. Ruby found Claire's earring under the couch. Grant found Ruby's questioning eyes across the dinner table. The war for Vanessa's life was being fought in her absence, and she was losing every battle. That night, Vanessa lay in the guest room of her own house, listening to voices from the master bedroom. Grant's deep murmur, a woman's breathy laugh. The sound of her marriage dying in real time. She reached for her phone to call Ruby, then remembered she didn't have a phone. The accident had taken that too, along with her keys, her independence, her sense of belonging in her own home. The night before Vanessa's surprise discharge, Grant made a call that chilled Ruby to the bone. Everything's in place. By tomorrow night, they'll both be gone, and the house will finally be ours. Ruby's hands shook as she realized she was listening to a man plan their destruction. She survived a car crash at 70 miles per hour, but the sight of her daughter's blue lips nearly killed her where she stood. The taxi dropped Vanessa at the circular driveway, just as Phoenix temperatures plummeted to near freezing. Unusual for January, but Arizona winters could surprise you with sudden cold that cut through desert-thin air like a blade. She called ahead from the hospital, told the staff she was getting discharged early. Her recovery had progressed faster than anyone expected. She wanted to surprise her family. Instead, they surprised her. Through the car window, she saw two figures huddled on the front porch like refugees from their own home. One elderly, one impossibly small, both wrapped in blankets that couldn't block the cold seeping through their clothes. Mia's small body pressed against Ruby's side, seeking warmth that her grandmother's thin frame couldn't provide. Vanessa's heart stopped. The front door stood locked. Through the massive windows that Grant loved because they showed off their expensive furniture, warm light spilled from inside. The chandelier glittered over their dining room table. The fireplace cast dancing shadows on marble floors. And there, on the leather sofa, facing the windows with a perfect view of the porch, sat Grant. Wine glass in hand, staring straight at his shivering family like he was watching a movie he'd seen before and wasn't particularly interested in seeing again. Phoenix winters were supposed to be mild, but that night felt arctic as Vanessa's ride pulled into the circular driveway. Through the car window, she saw two figures huddled on the porch like refugees from their own home. One elderly, one impossibly small, both shivering. Vanessa stumbled from the taxi, her healing leg sending shocks of pain up her spine. The walking stick the physical therapist had given her clicked against stone pavers as she rushed toward the porch. "Mama? Mia? What are you doing out here?" Ruby looked up with eyes that held 3 months of stored tears. Her face was red from cold, her lips pale, but her voice stayed steady for Mia's sake. "Hey baby, we've been waiting for you." Mia threw herself into Vanessa's arms, small body trembling like a bird. Her fingers were ice against Vanessa's neck, her nose running from cold she was too young to understand. "Mommy, you're home. We tried to get inside, but the door won't open and Daddy said we had to wait outside until you came home." The sound of her daughter's chattering teeth cut through Vanessa's chest like broken glass. 7 years old, and Mia was learning that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most. "How long have you been out here?" Ruby's eyes flicked toward the windows where Grant sat watching them. Since about 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. It was nearly 7 now. 3 hours in below freezing weather because Grant, her husband, Mia's father, had locked them outside their own home. Vanessa tried the front door handle. Locked. She rang the doorbell, watching through glass panels as Grant slowly rose from his chair, set down his wine, and approached the door like he was being interrupted during his favorite television show. The lock clicked. The door opened just wide enough for Grant to fill the space, blocking their entry to warmth and safety. "You should have called," he said, his voice flat as winter ground. But his eyes held something worse than indifference. They held satisfaction. "Why are they outside? Why is the door locked?" "I told Ruby not to use her key anymore. Security reasons. And Mia needed some fresh air." Fresh air. In near-freezing weather. For 3 hours. They could have gotten hypothermia. Mia's lips are blue. Grant glanced at their daughter with the same expression he'd give a piece of furniture that needed replacing. "Children are more resilient than you think." Vanessa pushed past him into the house, pulling Mia with her while Ruby followed on shaking legs. The warmth hit them like a physical force, but it felt hollow. Expensive heat in a house that had lost its heart. "We need to get you both warmed up," Vanessa said, rubbing Mia's tiny hands between her own. "Hot chocolate and warm baths." "Actually," Grant said, closing the door with deliberate slowness, "there are some things we need to discuss first." He stood between his family and the rest of their home, like a sentinel guarding treasure from thieves. Behind him, Vanessa could see evidence of the life that had continued without her. Takeout containers on the kitchen counter, mail stacked high, Mia's toys scattered in corners where they clearly didn't belong anymore. "What we need is to take care of our daughter." "Our daughter." Grant repeated the words like they tasted foreign. "That's actually part of what we need to discuss." The living room where they'd once planned Mia's birthday parties became a courtroom where Grant served as judge, jury, and executioner of their family. Leather furniture and crystal chandeliers witnessed the systematic destruction of everything Vanessa held sacred. "Sit down, Vanessa. Both of you." Ruby remained standing, one hand protective on Mia's shoulder. "I think I'll take Mia upstairs for that bath now." "No." Grant's voice carried an authority that made everyone freeze. Everyone sits. Everyone listens. They sat on the sofa where Vanessa had nursed Mia as a baby, where they'd read bedtime stories, where she'd once felt like the luckiest woman alive. Now it felt like sitting in a courtroom, waiting for a sentence to be pronounced. Grant poured himself more wine, didn't offer anything to his family who'd spent 3 hours in the cold. The same family he'd vowed to protect and cherish. "While you were in the hospital," he began, his tone businesslike, "I had time to think about our situation, about what's best for everyone involved. Picture coming home to find your child locked out in the cold by someone who claimed to love them. What would be your first move? How would you handle that rage? I never wanted Ruby living here permanently. This house wasn't designed for multiple generations. And Mia." He looked at their daughter like she was a problem requiring solution. "Mia needs structure, discipline, the kind of education that prepares her for the life she deserves. She's 7 years old. She needs her mother. She needs stability, which is why I've enrolled her at Fairfield Academy in Connecticut. Boarding school, the best money can buy." The words hit Vanessa like physical blows. Boarding school, 3,000 miles away, for a 7-year-old who still slept with night lights. "You can't send her away. I can do whatever I think is best for my daughter." My daughter, not our daughter. Possession claimed by a man who just locked that same daughter outside in freezing weather. Ruby's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "And what about Vanessa? What's best for her?" Grant's smile held no warmth. "Vanessa's had 3 months to recover. Time to think about whether this lifestyle really suits her, whether she's truly happy here." The threat hung in the air, like smoke from a fire that was just getting started. When Grant mentioned that Claire was already picking out new furniture for Mia's room at boarding school, something snapped in Vanessa's chest. The woman who'd spent months learning to walk again suddenly remembered how to fight. As Grant stood in the doorway blocking their entry, words poured from his mouth that would haunt Vanessa forever. "I never wanted them here. I never wanted you broken. This house deserves better." The man she married was gone, replaced by a stranger wearing his face. Behind every cruel betrayal is a plan so calculated it would make chess masters weep with envy. The warmth of the house felt like a mockery after what Vanessa had witnessed. Mia clung to her side, while Ruby sat rigid on the sofa, both of them still shivering from 3 hours in the cold. Grant paced the living room like a general addressing troops he expected to surrender without a fight. "Let me make this simple for everyone," he said, swirling wine in his crystal glass. "Things are going to change around here. Big changes." Vanessa pulled Mia closer, feeling her daughter's small body still trembling. "The only change needed is you treating your family with basic human decency." Grant laughed at her words. "Family? Let me tell you about family, Vanessa. Family means people who contribute something valuable. People who add to your life instead of weighing it down." The cruelty in his voice was surgical, precise, designed to cut deepest where it would hurt most. Ruby's sharp intake of breath told Vanessa her mother understood exactly what Grant was implying. "Mia and I have already discussed her future," Grant continued, ignoring the way their daughter's eyes widened with confusion. "Fairfield Academy has an excellent program for girls her age. She'll get the education she deserves, mix with the right sort of people, learn what it means to be a Whitaker. She's 7 years old. She needs her mother, not some boarding school 3,000 miles away. What she needs is structure, consistency, things she won't get from a mother who can barely walk straight and a grandmother who thinks hard work is a virtue instead of a failure to plan properly." The words hit Ruby like physical blows. Vanessa watched her mother's face crumble, watched 63 years of dignity and strength dissolve under Grant's casual cruelty. He'd been planning this for months, maybe years. Every kind gesture during her recovery was a performance. Every promise a lie designed to keep her compliant while he dismantled their life piece by piece. "But boarding school is just the beginning," Grant said, settling into his leather chair like a king on a throne. "I've also been thinking about our living situation. This house is too big for the kind of modest family life you seem to prefer. This is our home. This is my house, bought with my money, decorated to my taste, maintained by staff I pay. And I've decided it's time for some residents to find alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements. Like Ruby and Mia were tenants whose lease had expired instead of family members who belonged here." Grant walked to his desk, pulled out a folder thick with legal documents. "I've taken the liberty of researching some options. There's a lovely assisted living facility in Scottsdale that would be perfect for Ruby. Very affordable, nice activities, people her own age." "Assisted living?" Ruby's voice cracked. "I'm 63, not 93. And you've lived a hard life, Ruby. All that work at the diner, raising Vanessa alone, never having anyone to take care of you properly. Don't you think you deserve some rest?" The manipulation was masterful. Take Ruby's greatest strength, her independence, her work ethic, her fierce love for her daughter, and reframe it as weakness deserving pity. "As for Mia," Grant continued, "Fairfield Academy has a wonderful summer program that starts in June. She'll make friends with children from appropriate families, learn proper manners, get the kind of education that opens doors." Appropriate families. Vanessa felt rage building in her chest like pressure in a steam kettle. "You mean families with money? I mean families with standards, with expectations, with the kind of connections that matter in the real world." The real world. As if the love between mother and daughter was some fairy tale that had no place in Grant's version of reality. Have you ever discovered that someone's kindness was actually cruelty in disguise? That their help was really them helping themselves to your life? Share your story of hidden betrayal. "And what about me?" Vanessa asked, though she was terrified of the answer. Grant's smile was the coldest thing in a room full of expensive but heartless objects. "Well, that depends entirely on you, doesn't it? You could accept these changes gracefully. Understand that sometimes what feels hard is actually what's best for everyone. Or, where you could make this difficult, fight me on custody, drag lawyers into our private business, force me to present evidence about your mental state since the accident." Mental state. The threat was clear as crystal. Grant would paint her as unstable, unfit, damaged goods who couldn't be trusted with major decisions about her own daughter. But then he played his final card, the one that revealed the true scope of his betrayal. Of course, there's also Claire to consider. The name dropped into the room like a bomb. Ruby's head snapped up. Mia looked between her parents with growing confusion. Vanessa felt the world tilt sideways. Claire Blackwood, my business partner. We've been working very closely together while you were recovering. She's been instrumental in helping me see things more clearly. Business partner. The euphemism was almost insulting in its transparency. She's actually here tonight, Grant continued, checking his expensive watch. Upstairs, freshening up. I thought it was time you met her properly. The shower sound from earlier. The women's laughter. The table set for two with candles and good wine. All of it suddenly made horrible sense. She has excellent taste, Grant said, gesturing around the room. Already has some wonderful ideas for redecorating once we have the house to ourselves. To ourselves. Past tense for a marriage that had apparently ended while Vanessa lay unconscious in a hospital bed. Footsteps echoed on the marble staircase. Designer heels clicked against stone with the confidence of someone who belonged here, who had every right to descend into this scene of family destruction wearing expensive perfume and probably very little else. Claire appeared in the doorway, like she was making an entrance at a society party. Blonde, polished, draped in a silk robe that cost more than Ruby's monthly rent. She looked at Vanessa with the kind of pity reserved for homeless people or injured animals. You must be the wife, she said, her voice carrying Connecticut finishing school vowels. Grant's told me so much about you. When Grant mentioned that Claire was already picking out new furniture for Mia's room at boarding school, something snapped in Vanessa's chest. The woman who'd spent months learning to walk again suddenly remembered how to fight. She'd been sleeping with the enemy for years, but the enemy never counted on her surviving long enough to wake up. Claire stood in the doorway of Vanessa's living room wearing silk and satisfaction, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her skin glowing with the kind of expensive treatments that money could buy and arrogance could justify. She looked at the broken family on the sofa like she was surveying property she'd already purchased. I should probably go upstairs and let you all talk, she said with fake consideration, her voice honey over broken glass. No, stay, Grant said, his hand possessive on Claire's lower back. We're all adults here. No need for secrets anymore. No need for secrets. Because the secret was out, displayed in their living room like an art installation titled, How to Destroy a Family in 3 Easy Steps. Ruby stood up slowly, her dignity gathering around her like armor. Mia, sweetheart, why don't you come help Grammy make some hot chocolate in the kitchen? But I want to hear. Now, Mia. Something in Ruby's tone made their 7-year-old obey without question. She slipped off the sofa and took her grandmother's hand, leaving Vanessa alone to face the wreckage of her marriage. How long? Vanessa asked when Mia's footsteps faded toward the kitchen. How long what? Grant poured himself more wine, offered the bottle to Claire, ignored his wife completely. How long have you been planning this? The affair, the boarding school, getting rid of my family, how long? Claire laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a tornado. Oh, honey, you make it sound so dramatic. Grant and I have history. We dated in college, stayed friends, reconnected when his life got complicated. Complicated. That's what they called a wife fighting for her life in a hospital bed. We reconnected about 6 months ago, Grant said, his arm sliding around Claire's waist. Right around the time I realized our marriage had run its course. 6 months ago, before the accident, before the crash that nearly killed her, which meant you were planning to leave me before I got hurt. I was planning to make some changes, yes. The accident just accelerated the timeline. Accelerated the timeline. Like her near-death experience was a business opportunity that needed to be maximized while she was too weak to fight back. The guest bedroom, where Vanessa now slept, became her war room. Medical bills and legal documents spread across flowered quilts like battle plans, while outside her window, the life she'd built crumbled into Arizona dust. But I have to thank you, Vanessa, Claire said, settling onto the leather sofa like she belonged there. Your little crisis really brought Grant and me together. Nothing like shared adversity to strengthen a relationship. Shared adversity. They'd bonded over Vanessa's suffering like it was a romantic comedy they'd enjoyed together. We've had the most wonderful months getting reacquainted, Claire continued. Grant showed me all your wedding photos. You were so young then, so hopeful. It's almost sweet how naive you were about what kind of man you were marrying. The cruelty was breathtaking in its casual delivery. Claire wasn't just stealing Grant. She was erasing Vanessa's entire history, rewriting their love story as a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong person. I want you both out of my house. Now, Grant laughed, the sound echoing off marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Your house. Vanessa, sweetheart, your name isn't on the deed. Never was. This house belongs to Whitaker Industries, which I own completely. The words hit her like ice water. During their marriage, Grant had handled all the paperwork, all the legal documents, all the financial arrangements. She'd trusted him completely, never questioned why her name didn't appear on official papers. But don't worry, he continued. I'm not heartless. I'll make sure you have somewhere to go. There's a nice little apartment complex in Tempe that takes people with limited resources. Limited resources, because he controlled every dollar she had access to, every credit card, every bank account. Years of nursing had taught Vanessa to think systematically under pressure, to stay calm during emergencies. This was the greatest emergency of her life, and Grant had forgotten he'd married a woman trained to save lives, including her own. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I try to be thorough in my business dealings. Business dealings. That's what their marriage had become, a transaction being dissolved by the majority shareholder. But Grant had made one crucial error. He'd assumed that 3 months in a hospital bed had broken her spirit along with her bones. He'd forgotten that the same determination that helped her survive a car crash at 70 miles per hour might also help her survive this. When life hits you with betrayal, do you curl up or stand up? What gave you the strength to fight when everything seemed lost? I need your success stories in the comments. I'll need some time to make arrangements, Vanessa said carefully. Of course, I'm not unreasonable. Take the weekend. Monday morning, I'll need the house back. The weekend. 72 hours to figure out how to save her daughter, protect her mother, and fight a man with unlimited resources and no conscience. And Mia? We'll spend Sunday night here, so I can take her to the airport Monday morning. Her flight to Connecticut leaves at 10. Monday morning, 3 days from now, her daughter would be on a plane to boarding school, 3,000 miles away from everything she'd ever known. Ruby appeared in the doorway, Mia nowhere in sight. She's upstairs playing in her room, she said quietly. I told her you were having grown-up conversations about boring stuff. Boring stuff, like the systematic destruction of everything they loved. Grant checked his watch, a platinum piece that probably cost more than most people's cars. We should probably call it a night. Claire and I have dinner reservations. Dinner reservations. In the house where his wife had just learned her marriage was over, her daughter was being stolen, and her mother was being discarded like furniture that no longer matched the decor. The private investigator's business card felt like a loaded gun in Vanessa's trembling hand. I can prove everything, the woman had whispered over the phone. But are you prepared for what we might find? Vanessa's answer would change everything. Sometimes the best weapon against a liar is the truth they thought they buried deep enough to stay hidden. Saturday morning came too soon and not soon enough. Vanessa lay in the guest room bed, her own guest room, in her own house that apparently had never been hers, staring at the ceiling and listening to sounds that used to comfort her. Mia's laughter from the kitchen, where Ruby was probably making pancakes. Birds chirping in trees that Grant's landscaping crew maintained with military precision. Normal sounds from a life that was about to disappear forever. Grant had left early for the office, claiming urgent business that couldn't wait for weekends. Claire had gone with him, her blonde hair perfect even at 7 in the morning, her silk blouse probably costing more than Vanessa's entire wardrobe. We'll be back this evening, Grant had announced over coffee that Ruby served with shaking hands. Claire wants to take some measurements for the redecorating. Measurements. Already planning how to erase every trace of Vanessa's existence from rooms where she lived and loved and nearly died from loneliness. But Grant's absence gave Vanessa something more valuable than gold: time. She waited until she heard his car pull out of the driveway, then moved faster than she had since leaving the hospital. The business card had been tucked in her wallet for months. Sarah, her nursing school friend, had given it to her over dinner that night before the accident. "If you ever need help with anything," Sarah had said, pressing the card into Vanessa's hand. "Anything at all. This woman saved my sister's life during a nasty divorce." Margaret Chun, private investigator. The same last name as Mrs. Chun next door, but no relation as far as Vanessa knew. She'd kept the card out of politeness, never thinking she'd need someone to investigate her own life. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. "Chun Investigations. Ms. Chun, this is Vanessa Whitaker. I need help." "What kind of help, Mrs. Whitaker?" "The kind that proves my husband is stealing my daughter and destroying my family." A pause. Then, "Can you meet me this afternoon? I have an opening at 2. The investigator's office felt like a shrine to shattered trust. Filing cabinets full of lies exposed, walls covered with evidence of marriages destroyed by greed. Here, Vanessa learned the awful truth. She wasn't Grant's first victim. Margaret Chin was nothing like Vanessa had expected. Small, compact, wearing a business suit that had seen better decades, but was impeccably clean. Her office occupied the second floor of a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The kind of place where people solved problems they couldn't afford to have. "Tell me everything," Margaret said, pulling out a legal pad that looked like it had survived several hurricanes. Vanessa started with the accident, the hospital, coming home to find Mia and Ruby locked outside. The words poured out like water through a broken dam. 3 months of stored fear and confusion, finally having somewhere to go. "He's taking my daughter to boarding school Monday morning. Says this house was never mine. Claims I'm mentally unstable because of the brain injury." Margaret wrote steadily, her pen moving across paper like she was taking down a grocery list instead of documenting the destruction of a family. "What about finances? Do you have access to bank statements, credit card records, anything showing money movement?" "He controls everything. I don't even know what accounts exist." "We'll find them. Men like your husband always leave trails. They can't help themselves. Too arrogant to think anyone would look." Margaret pulled a file from her desk drawer, thick with documents and photographs. "I worked a case last year, very similar situation. Wealthy tech executive, younger wife, sudden interest in sending children away to school. Want to guess what we found? Another woman, 3 other women, plus systematic asset transfer, hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands, and a pattern of isolating wives from their support systems before divorcing them with minimal settlements. 3 other women." Vanessa's stomach turned over. "Was I just practice? You were a target. They pick women with limited family connections, modest backgrounds, people who don't know how to navigate wealth and power. Women who trust easily because they love deeply." The description fit Vanessa like a glove tailored specifically for her destruction. Margaret pulled out more files, spreading photographs across her desk like tarot cards, reading a fortune written in betrayal. "Grant Whitaker isn't just unfaithful, Mrs. Whitaker. He's a predator who uses marriage as a business strategy." The photos showed Grant with different women over the past 5 years. Hotel entrances, restaurant exits, apartment buildings where he clearly didn't live. But one woman appeared more frequently than the others in recent months. Claire, at business dinners where she sat too close. At hotels where business had nothing to do with software development. At jewelry stores where she examined rings that weren't for his wife. If you discovered your entire marriage was a lie designed to steal your life, would you want revenge or just escape? What would justice look like to you? The really interesting part, Margaret continued, is the timing. Your accident happened on January 15th. Grant and Claire registered as domestic partners in Nevada on January 20th. January 20th, 5 days after Vanessa nearly died. While she was still unconscious in the ICU, fighting for her life, Grant was in Las Vegas, making Claire his legal next of kin. Domestic partners have certain rights in case of unfortunate circumstances. Rights that supersede those of estranged spouses, especially ones who might be considered mentally incompetent due to brain injuries. The room spun around Vanessa like she was still in that car, hydroplaning across I-10 toward inevitable collision. "You're saying he was planning for me to die?" Margaret's expression stayed carefully neutral. "I'm saying the paperwork suggests someone was covering their bases in case your recovery didn't go as well as it did." She pulled out another document that made Vanessa's blood freeze. Life insurance policies, 5 of them, all taken out in the months before the accident. All with Claire listed as beneficiary. $2 million, Mrs. Whitaker. That's what your death would have been worth to your husband and his new partner. $2 million. Enough to buy a lot of designer clothes, expensive dinners, and guilt-free consciences. "But you survived," Margaret continued. "Which means they had to improvise. Quick divorce, claim mental instability, ship the daughter away before she could testify about daddy's girlfriends, and start over with a clean slate. The plan was elegant in its cruelty, efficient in its thoroughness, almost perfect except for one crucial flaw. They underestimated you, Mrs. Whitaker. Most women in your situation would be too broken, too scared, too isolated to fight back. But you're here in my office, asking questions and demanding answers." Among the private investigator's files, Vanessa found something that stopped her heart. Medical records showing Grant had been researching ways to have her declared mentally incompetent. The accident wasn't his opportunity, it was his inspiration. The most powerful witnesses are the ones who see everything but say nothing. Until someone finally asked the right questions. Margaret Chin closed a file of photographs and leaned back in her chair. "There's someone else you need to meet. Someone who's been watching your house for months, documenting everything." "Who?" "Mrs. Helen Chun. No relation to me, despite the name. She lives next door to you, and she's been very concerned about what she's been seeing." Mrs. Chun, the elderly woman who always waved when Vanessa drove past, who brought cookies at Christmas, who kept her blinds open and her porch light on like she was standing guard over the neighborhood. "She called me 3 weeks ago," Margaret continued. "Said she had information about a situation that wasn't right, but didn't know who to tell. When you called this morning, I realized she'd been talking about your family." An hour later, Vanessa sat in Mrs. Chen's kitchen while the elderly woman poured tea from a china service that had probably witnessed decades of neighborhood secrets. Through the window, Vanessa could see her own house, Grant's house, gleaming in the Arizona sunshine like it had never harbored darkness. "I've been watching that place since November," Mrs. Chun said, settling into her chair with the careful movements of someone whose bones remembered being young. Something wasn't right. A woman doesn't just disappear from her own home without people noticing. Mrs. Chin's kitchen window had been a silent movie theater for months, playing out the tragedy of Vanessa's marriage in real time. Now the elderly woman's careful documentation would become the screenplay for Grant's downfall. "I keep a journal," Mrs. Chin explained, pulling a composition notebook from a kitchen drawer. "Old habit from my teaching days. Write down anything unusual, anything that doesn't feel right." The notebook was filled with careful handwriting documenting months of observations. Dates, times, license plate numbers of cars that didn't belong. A chronicle of betrayal written in blue ink and righteous indignation. November 15th. Different woman's car in driveway overnight. Silver Mercedes, Connecticut plates. November 22nd. Loud argument heard from backyard. Male voice saying she won't be a problem much longer. December 8th. Young child cry on front porch while adult voices argue inside house. Page after page of evidence that Vanessa's marriage had been dying long before she nearly did. "But the night that really upset me," Mrs. Chun said, turning to a page marked with a yellow sticky note, "was January 20th. The night they put your mother and little girl outside in the cold. You saw that. Honey, I filmed it." Mrs. Chun reached into a kitchen drawer and pulled out a small digital camera. "My grandson gave me this for Christmas. Said I should document the neighborhood for posterity. I don't think this is what he had in mind." She turned on the camera's small screen and handed it to Vanessa. The footage was shaky but clear, timestamp showing 4:17 p.m. on the day Vanessa came home from the hospital. Ruby and Mia huddled on the porch, trying the door handle, knocking, calling out. And there, clearly visible through the living room windows, sat Grant, wine in hand, watching his family suffer like it was entertainment. "I almost called the police," Mrs. Chin said, "but I didn't want to make trouble for your family, if there was some explanation. Now I wish I had." The Scottsdale neighborhood that seemed so cold and distant revealed its hidden heart. Behind manicured lawns and security gates lived people who'd been quietly watching, waiting for someone to give them permission to care. "There's more," Mrs. Chun continued. "Other neighbors have been talking. The Johnsons next door to you on the other side, they heard things too, saw things that didn't sit right." She made phone calls while Vanessa watched, her thin fingers moving across number pads with the efficiency of someone who'd been a school principal for 30 years and knew how to organize people when action was needed. Within an hour, Vanessa's kitchen table looked like a command center. The Johnsons brought security camera footage. The Martinez family across the street contributed photographs. The retired police officer 2 houses down offered testimony about suspicious vehicles and behavioral patterns that suggested domestic instability. Have you ever wished you'd spoken up when you saw someone being mistreated? What stops us from helping? And what gives us courage to act? Share your thoughts on community responsibility. "We all saw what was happening," said Detective Robert Martinez, retired from Phoenix PD, but still carrying the sharp eyes of someone trained to notice details others missed. "Rich guy, pretty wife who got quieter and more isolated as time went on. Then suddenly she's gone for months, and there's a new woman playing house. Why didn't anyone say anything before? What were we supposed to say? Rich people have complicated lives. Maybe you were having marriage troubles. Maybe the hospital stay was giving you both time to think. We didn't want to assume the worst. Until last night," Mrs. Chun interrupted. "Until we saw him lock a child and an elderly woman outside in freezing weather while he sat inside with his girlfriend, watching them suffer. That's when we knew," Detective Martinez added. "This wasn't about marriage problems anymore. This was about something much darker." Mrs. Chun reached across the table and took Vanessa's hands in her own. "Honey, that man didn't just cheat on you. He planned to destroy you. And when you survived what should have killed you, he tried to finish the job by taking everything that mattered to you. But here's what he didn't count on," Detective Martinez said. "He didn't count on neighbors who pay attention. He didn't count on an old woman with a camera and a sense of justice. And he sure as hell didn't count on you being strong enough to fight back." Mrs. Chin's final revelation made Vanessa's blood run cold. "That night you came home, he knew you were coming. He put them outside on purpose, child. He wanted you to see what powerless looked like. The cruelty was deliberate, calculated, designed to break her spirit completely. In divorce court, the truth doesn't always win, but sometimes justice finds a way to level the playing field." Monday morning arrived like a death sentence. Grant had already left for the airport with Mia's suitcase packed and her boarding school paperwork signed. But Mia wasn't going anywhere. At 7 a.m., Detective Martinez knocked on Grant's front door with a court order and 2 patrol officers. The emergency custody injunction that Margaret Chin had filed Sunday night meant no child could be removed from Arizona until a judge reviewed the evidence. Vanessa watched from Mrs. Chin's kitchen window as Grant's carefully constructed plan exploded in his driveway. She saw him gesture wildly at the officers, saw him pull out his phone to call expensive lawyers, saw his face turn red when they explained that money couldn't override a judge's direct order. "How does it feel to watch someone else control your life?" Ruby asked, standing beside her daughter at the window. "Like justice tastes better than I expected." The courthouse marble echoed with the footsteps of justice delayed but not denied. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across faces telling hard truths, while outside, Phoenix sunshine seemed to mock the darkness being exposed within. 3 weeks later, Vanessa sat in the Maricopa County Family Court building, surrounded by evidence that would have impressed a federal prosecutor. Margaret Chin had worked miracles in 21 days, uncovering financial records that painted Grant as a serial predator who used marriage as a business strategy. "Your Honor," said Jennifer Walsh, the attorney Margaret had recommended, The evidence will show that Mr. Whitaker has engaged in a pattern of systematic abuse, financial manipulation, and child endangerment that goes far beyond a simple divorce dispute. Grant's legal team occupied 3 tables, their suits costing more than most people's annual salaries. They tried every delay tactic in the book, but Judge Patricia Rodriguez had seen enough wealthy men try to buy their way out of consequences to recognize the pattern. Mr. Whitaker, Judge Rodriguez said, her voice carrying 30 years of family court experience, you will remain seated while evidence is presented. Your attorneys will have their turn to respond. The first witness was Mrs. Chun, whose journal entries and camera footage created a timeline of abuse that made the courtroom gallery gasp. Grant's attorney tried to dismiss her as a nosy neighbor with too much time on her hands, but the footage spoke louder than legal objections. That's a grown man, Mrs. Chun said, pointing to the video screen showing Grant through his living room window, watching a child and elderly woman freeze outside his house while he drinks wine. You tell me what kind of person does that to his own family? Detective Martinez followed with expert testimony about domestic abuse patterns and escalation warning signs. His 40 years in law enforcement gave weight to observations that might otherwise seem circumstantial. In my professional opinion, Martinez testified, Mr. Whitaker exhibits classic control behaviors associated with financial and emotional abuse. The isolation of the victim's support system, the systematic removal of independence, the calculated timing of major life decisions during periods of victim vulnerability, these are textbook predator tactics. But the testimony that broke the courtroom came from an unexpected source. Claire Blackwood sat in the witness box, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd paraded through Vanessa's living room in silk and smugness. Margaret Shin had found Claire's previous victims, 2 women whose lives Grant had destroyed before moving on to newer targets. Grant's attorney painted pictures of a brain-injured woman unfit for custody, but evidence painted a different story, a calculating husband who'd been planning abandonment long before any accident occurred. He told me Vanessa would be easy to handle, Claire testified, her voice barely above a whisper. Said she was naive, trusting, the kind of woman who'd believe anything if you said it nicely enough. Did Mr. Whitaker ever discuss his wife's accident with you? Yes, he said. Claire's voice cracked. He said it was the best thing that could have happened. That brain injuries made people compliant, easier to control. The courtroom erupted in murmurs that Judge Rodriguez silenced with her gavel. Did Mr. Whitaker ever express concern for his wife's recovery? No, he was excited about it. Said injured women don't fight custody battles effectively, don't question financial arrangements, don't have the energy to investigate their husband's business dealings. And what were those business dealings? Claire looked directly at Grant for the first time since taking the stand. Asset transfer. He'd been moving money to offshore accounts for months, hiding it from Vanessa, so she'd have nothing to fight with if she tried to leave. What would you do if you had to choose between protecting your child and protecting your privacy? How far would you go to ensure justice in a system designed to favor wealth? But the most devastating testimony came from Mia herself. Judge Rodriguez had ordered a private interview with the 7-year-old, conducted by a court-appointed child psychologist in chambers designed to be non-threatening to young witnesses. When Mia took the stand, her small voice carried the weight of absolute truth. Daddy used to hug me. Then he stopped. Then he locked me outside. I don't understand why. Can you tell the judge about the night Mommy came home from the hospital? Dr. Sarah Chun asked gently. Grammy and me were outside, and it was really cold, and we couldn't get in the house. Grammy said Daddy would let us in soon, but he didn't. We could see him inside watching TV. How did that make you feel? Scared and sad. Grammy was shivering, and I thought maybe Daddy forgot about us. Did Grammy say anything while you were waiting? She said grown-ups sometimes make mistakes, but they usually fix them. But Daddy didn't fix it. Mommy had to come home and bang on the door. The innocence in Mia's testimony cut through legal arguments and expensive objections like sunlight through fog. Here was truth without manipulation, memory without agenda, pain without calculation. Grant's attorney tried damage control. Your Honor, Children often misunderstand adult situations. What appear to be deliberate exclusion might have been a simple miscommunication about house keys. Counsel, Judge Rodriguez interrupted. I've seen the video footage. There was no miscommunication. There was a man watching his family suffer while he had the power to end that suffering with a simple turn of a door handle. As Grant's financial crimes were laid bare in court, his face went pale. Asset hiding, insurance fraud, domestic partnership filing while his wife lay unconscious, the charges kept coming. But his lawyer's final whisper made Vanessa's heart race. We have one more card to play. The war was far from over. Desperate men make dangerous enemies. And Grant Whitaker was about to prove just how far he'd fall to avoid losing everything. Grant's counterattack came like a tsunami, swift, devastating, and designed to destroy everything in its path. By Thursday morning, 3 days after his humiliation in court, the local news was running stories about the disturbed wife who was trying to steal millions from her devoted husband while he cared for her after a tragic accident. The headlines made Vanessa's stomach turn. Brain injury changes woman into vengeful ex. Tech CEO's wife demands fortune after car crash. Local mother accused of coaching child against father. Someone had leaked carefully edited information to reporters who didn't bother checking facts before broadcasting lies to thousands of Phoenix viewers. Grant's media strategy was surgical. Paint Vanessa as unstable, greedy, and manipulative while positioning himself as the long-suffering husband trying to protect his daughter from an unfit mother. It's character assassination, Jennifer Walsh explained during an emergency meeting at her law office. Classic strategy when you can't win on facts. Destroy the opponent's credibility in the court of public opinion. The mansion that once sheltered their family became a fortress under siege. News vans lined the circular driveway like vultures, reporters hunting for blood while inside. A mother fought for her daughter's future with everything she had left. Vanessa couldn't leave the house without cameras following her, microphones thrust in her face, questions shouted about her mental state and fitness as a mother. The brain injury that had nearly killed her was now being used as evidence that she couldn't be trusted to raise her own daughter. Mrs. Whitaker, how do you respond to allegations that you're using your child to get revenge on your husband? Mrs. Whitaker, is it true you have no memory of entire months after your accident? Mrs. Whitaker, do you think traumatic brain injury affects parental judgment? Ruby stood guard at the front door, like a bulldog protecting her territory. You people should be ashamed, she told one persistent reporter. Kicking a woman when she's down, twisting truth into lies just to sell newspapers. But the media circus was just the opening act. Grant's real strategy targeted Vanessa where she was most vulnerable, through Mia. The threatening phone call came at 3 a.m., waking Vanessa from the first decent sleep she'd had in weeks. You need to drop this custody fight, said a voice she didn't recognize. Stop making trouble for Mr. Whitaker, or there will be consequences. Who is this? Someone who thinks you should consider what's best for your daughter. Accidents happen to little girls who get caught in the middle of adult problems. The line went dead. Vanessa's hands shook as she checked every door, every window, every possible way someone could hurt the most important person in her world. Have you ever been publicly attacked or humiliated by someone who claimed to love you? How do you maintain dignity when lies spread faster than truth? Share your survival strategies. Grant's harassment campaign escalated daily. Private investigators followed Vanessa to doctor appointments, photographed her buying groceries, documented every stumble as she continued recovering from injuries that had nearly killed her. They were building a case that painted her as physically and mentally incapable of caring for a child. Look at her, Grant's attorney would tell the judge. She can't walk a straight line, can't remember conversations from week to week, can't manage basic household tasks without assistance. Is this the kind of environment we want for an impressionable young girl? The attacks weren't limited to Vanessa. Ruby found her car tires slashed in a grocery store parking lot. Someone called Child Protective Services claiming Mia was being neglected and abused. Anonymous tips flooded the police station reporting drug use and mental instability at the address where Vanessa was staying. They're trying to break you down, Margaret Chun explained during one of their evening strategy sessions. Make you so exhausted, so paranoid, so overwhelmed that you'll surrender just to make it stop. The pressure was working. Vanessa caught herself jumping at every sound, checking on Mia obsessively, wondering if the next phone call would bring news that someone had taken her daughter while she wasn't paying attention. Grant's story painted him as the devoted husband caring for a brain-damaged wife who'd become violent and unstable. Social media exploded with false narratives designed to destroy Vanessa's credibility and public sympathy. The breaking point came when someone called Mia's school claiming to be Grant's assistant, saying there had been a family emergency and Mia needed to be picked up immediately. Only the principal's quick thinking and call to verify the story prevented what could have been a kidnapping disguised as parental rights. This isn't legal warfare anymore, Detective Martinez told Vanessa after investigating the school incident. This is stalking, harassment, and attempted child abduction. Grant crossed lines that even expensive lawyers can't uncross. But Grant had one final card to play, one that would either destroy Vanessa completely or backfire so spectacularly that would end his reign of terror forever. The envelope arrived on a Friday afternoon, delivered by courier to the house where Vanessa was staying with Ruby and Mia. Inside were photographs, doctored images showing Vanessa in compromising situations with men she'd never met, medical records falsified to suggest drug abuse, financial documents forged to indicate she'd been stealing money from charity accounts. If you don't withdraw your custody petition by Monday, read the note attached to the fabricated evidence. These documents will be released to every media outlet in Arizona. Your reputation will be destroyed, your daughter will be taken away permanently, and you'll face criminal charges for fraud and drug possession. The threatening phone call came at 3 a.m. Drop the charges, or you'll never see me again. As Vanessa's hands shook, she realized Grant's desperation had crossed into something far more dangerous than legal warfare. Some battles are won in courtrooms, others in the dark hours when you decide whether fear or love will guide your next move. The forged photographs spread across Vanessa's kitchen table like tarot cards predicting disaster. Each image was a masterpiece of digital manipulation, her face seamlessly attached to bodies and situations that would destroy any mother's credibility in custody court. Grant's final weapon wasn't truth or law or even money. It was the threat of complete character destruction. These are fake, Ruby said, her voice tight with rage. Anyone with eyes can see they're fake. But will a jury see that? Vanessa asked. Will the judge? Will the reporters who've already decided I'm an unstable gold digger? The safe house felt like a tomb. Anonymous walls and rented furniture hiding 3 generations of women learning what it meant to survive when everything familiar disappeared. Outside, Phoenix sprawled in neon indifference while inside, a family rebuilt itself from ashes. Margaret Chun examined the photographs with a magnifying glass, her professional eye cataloging the technical flaws that proved their falsified nature. Whoever made these was skilled, but not perfect. See the lighting inconsistencies here? The shadow angles that don't match? We can prove these are manufactured. But can we prove it before Monday? We could try. Try. Not guarantee. Not promise. Try. The word hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was consuming everything Vanessa had left to lose. Mia played in the corner with toys that Mrs. Chun had bought, her 7-year-old mind unable to fully grasp why they couldn't go home, why strangers followed them everywhere, why Daddy had become the scary person in stories instead of the hero. "Mommy," she said during dinner, "when can we go back to our house?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Is Daddy still mad at us?" How do you explain to a child that her father wasn't mad, but something worse, indifferent to her existence, except as a weapon to hurt her mother? Sometimes grown-ups have problems that have nothing to do with little girls, Vanessa said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. You didn't do anything wrong. But Mia's next words cut straight through adult pretense to the heart of truth. If I'm really good, will Daddy love me again? The night Vanessa found Mia crying in her sleep, whispering, I want to go home, to a home that no longer existed. She nearly called Grant's lawyer to surrender everything. Almost. That night, alone in the borrowed bedroom while Ruby and Mia slept, Vanessa stared at her reflection in the darkness of the window. The woman looking back was a stranger, thinner than before the accident, marked by scars that would never fully fade, eyes that had seen too much betrayal to ever trust completely again. But she was alive. Against all odds, against Grant's hopes, against the statistic for her type of injuries, she was alive. Her phone buzzed with another threatening text. Last chance. Drop the case or watch your world burn. Instead of fear, Vanessa felt something she hadn't experienced since before the accident. Clarity. Pure, crystal clarity about what mattered and what didn't. Grant could release fake photographs. He could buy media coverage and hire private investigators and threaten her with lawyers who cost more per hour than most families earned in months. But he couldn't change one fundamental truth. He had abandoned his daughter when she needed him most, and Mia would remember that forever. In her darkest moment, Vanessa remembered something her father used to say: the strongest steel goes through the hottest fire. She'd survived the crash, survived the betrayal, survived the courts. She could survive whatever came next. I'm not dropping the case, she said to the empty room, her voice steady for the first time in months. The next morning brought unexpected reinforcement. Jennifer Walsh called with news that made Vanessa's heart race with hope instead of fear. Claire Blackwood wants to meet with you. Tonight, she says she has information that will end Grant's harassment campaign permanently. What kind of information? The kind that could send him to prison. When you're your absolute breaking point, what keeps you going? What voice in your head says don't give up when everything else says surrender? I need to hear your stories of miraculous inner strength. The meeting was arranged for neutral territory, a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, where security cameras and public witnesses would make threats impossible. Vanessa arrived first, choosing a table near the window where she could watch for danger while staying visible to other customers. Claire walked in looking nothing like the confident woman who'd invaded Vanessa's home weeks earlier. Her designer clothes hung loose. Her perfect hair showed roots that needed touching up. Her hands shook as she ordered coffee she wouldn't drink. I need to tell you something, Claire said, sliding into the booth across from Vanessa. Something about the night of your accident. What about it? Claire's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. It wasn't an accident. The coffee shop noise faded to background static. Other conversations, traffic sounds, the hiss of the espresso machine. All of it disappeared as Claire's words echoed in Vanessa's brain. What do you mean? Grant had your car serviced the week before. Said he wanted to surprise you with maintenance you've been putting off. But I saw the receipt from the mechanic. It wasn't maintenance. It was modification. What kind of modification? Brake lines, steering components, things that would fail under stress, like driving in heavy rain at highway speeds. The room spun around Vanessa like she was back in that car, hydroplaning toward the guardrail that should have been her grave. You're saying he tried to kill me? I'm saying he took out 5 life insurance policies on you 3 months before the accident. I'm saying he had your car sabotaged by someone who specializes in mechanical failures that look like accidents. I'm saying when you survived what should have killed you, he was disappointed, not relieved. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. I have recordings of our conversations. Him talking about the insurance money, about starting over somewhere new, about how much easier life would be without complications. Why are you telling me this now? Because I can't live with it anymore. Because watching him try to destroy you and take your daughter away from you makes me sick. Because I realize that if he could do this to you, someday he'll do it to me too. The phone call that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Claire. Grant's affair partner had something to confess that would either save Vanessa's case or destroy her completely. Meet me tonight, the woman sobbed. There's something you need to know about the accident. The worst betrayal isn't adultery or theft. It's discovering someone tried to orchestrate your death and call it love. The digital recorder sat between them on the coffee shop table like a small bomb, waiting to explode Grant's carefully constructed lies. Claire's hands trembled as she pressed play. and Grant's voice filled the space with words that turned Vanessa's blood to ice water. The insurance policies will pay out $2 million if it looks accidental. Car accidents are perfect. Nobody questions brake failure in bad weather. Vanessa gripped the edge of the table as her husband's voice continued, casual and calculating, discussing her murder like a business transaction. Claire, baby, think about it. $2 million and a fresh start. No messe divórcio, no custou de battles, no splitting assets. Just us and enough money to live anywhere we want. Claire's recorded voice responded. But what if she survives? What if something goes wrong? Brain injuries are unpredictable. Even if she lives, she'll be damaged goods. Easy to control, easy to have declared incompetent. Either way, she won't be a problem much longer. The desert diner where they met felt like a confessional, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while outside, Arizona stretched into darkness that seemed appropriate for secrets this terrible. Claire's hand shook as she pushed evidence across Formica that had witnessed 1,000 smaller tragedies. I recorded everything, Claire whispered, her voice breaking. Every conversation about the insurance money, the mechanic who sabotaged your car, the backup plans in case you survived. I kept thinking Grant was just venting, just talking through impossible scenarios. I didn't believe he'd actually try to murder me. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Attempted murder disguised as loving provision. A husband who'd taken wedding vows to protect and cherish, then hired someone to tamper with brake lines and steering components. The mechanic's name is Danny Torres, Claire continued, pulling out more evidence. Grant paid him $15,000 to make your car fail at exactly the right moment. Highway speeds, bad weather, conditions that would make survival unlikely. How do you know all this? Because I drove Grant to the meetings. Because I thought I was part of some insurance scam, not a murder plot. Because I'm an idiot who fell for a man who sees people as obstacles to eliminate instead of human beings to love. Claire spread photographs across the table. Pictures of Danny Torres, copies of financial transactions, receipts for car parts that had no legitimate purpose except causing mechanical failure. Evidence of premeditated murder planned with the same attention to detail Grant brought to software development. He didn't just want you gone, Claire whispered, her voice cracking. He wanted you dead. The accident was supposed to finish what he started. When you survived, he had to improvise. What about the night I came home from the hospital, locking Mia and Ruby outside? Psychological warfare. He wanted to break your spirit, make you feel powerless, convince you that fighting back was hopeless. He thought a woman with brain injuries wouldn't have the strength or intelligence to challenge him. How do you process learning that someone you loved and trusted literally tried to kill you? What would justice look like for attempted murder disguised as marriage? Share your thoughts on ultimate betrayal. The recording continued with more horrifying details. Grant discussing backup plans if the car accident failed. Alternative methods of elimination that wouldn't raise insurance investigation flags. Conversations about hiring people who specialized in making murders look like accidents or suicides. November 15th, Claire read from notes she'd kept. Grant said exact words. If the car thing doesn't work, there are other options. Depressed wife with brain injuries, recent trauma, financial stress. Suicide would be believable. Suicide. He'd been planning to stage her death and make it look self-inflicted if the car crash didn't kill her completely. The really sick part, Claire continued, is how he talked about Mia. Said boarding school would be better for her anyway, because she wouldn't have to deal with memories of her unstable mother's tragic end. Unstable mother. Grant had been planning to rewrite history, turning himself into the devoted single father whose wife couldn't handle recovery from her accident. The grieving widower who bravely raised his daughter alone after losing his beloved spouse to depression and brain injury complications. Why didn't you go to police when you realized what he was planning? Because I was in too deep. Because he had evidence of my involvement, recordings of me agreeing to help with what I thought was insurance fraud. Because I was scared he'd kill me too if I tried to stop him. The insurance policies Grant had secretly increased, the tampered brakes the investigator had found, the life insurance beneficiaries he'd changed. It all painted a picture of premeditated murder disguised as loving provision. But Claire's final revelation was the most chilling of all. The night before your accident, Grant made one last call to Danny Torres. I heard both sides because Grant had it on speaker, thought I was asleep. Danny said the work was done. Your car would fail on the first hard turn or sudden stop. Grant asked what would happen to you. What did Torres say? He said at highway speeds, with the modifications he'd made, survival was basically impossible. Grant asked him to be more specific about the timeline. Timeline? How long it would take you to die after the crash? Whether you'd be conscious, whether you'd suffer. Grant wanted to know if you'd realize what was happening before the end. The horror of planned, calculated murder cut through Vanessa like broken glass. This wasn't crime of passion or moment of rage. This was methodical elimination of an inconvenient wife by a man who valued money more than human life. Torres told him you'd probably die on impact, but if you survived the initial crash, internal injuries would finish the job within hours. Grant seemed disappointed that you might not suffer more. Disappointed that his wife's death might be quick instead of agonizing. As Claire handed over recorded conversations proving Grant's murderous intent, Vanessa realized with crystal clarity she hadn't just survived an accident and a divorce. She'd survived a carefully planned execution. Tomorrow, Grant would discover that dead women tell no tales, but living ones can send you to prison. There's one more thing, Claire said, her voice barely audible. Grant's planning to leave the country. He has accounts in the Cayman Islands, a passport under a different name, tickets to somewhere without extradition treaties. If we don't stop him soon, he'll disappear forever. As Claire handed over recorded conversations proving Grant's murderous intent, Vanessa realized with crystal clarity she hadn't just survived an accident and a divorce. She'd survived a carefully planned execution. Tomorrow, Grant would discover that dead women tell no tales, but living ones can send you to prison. Some victories are measured in dollars won, others in years of freedom lost. But the sweetest victory is watching a predator finally face consequences. Tuesday morning, Phoenix police surrounded Grant's mansion like an army reclaiming occupied territory. Detective Martinez led the arrest team, his face grim with the satisfaction of a career cop finally catching a predator who thought money could buy immunity from justice. Grant answered the door in his silk pajamas, coffee mug in hand, probably expecting another media interview or legal meeting. Instead, he found handcuffs and headlines that would destroy his reputation forever. Grant Whitaker, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and domestic abuse. You have the right to remain silent. The words echoed across the circular driveway where news cameras captured every moment of Grant's fall from tech CEO to criminal defendant. No amount of expensive suits or family connections could save him from the evidence Claire had provided. Vanessa watched from Detective Martinez's unmarked car, Mia beside her, both of them safe behind tinted windows as justice finally arrived for the man who tried to destroy their family. Is Daddy going to jail? Mia asked, her small voice confused but not sad. Yes, sweetheart. He broke very serious laws, and now he has to face consequences for what he did. Will he be there for a long time? A very long time. The courtroom gallery buzzed with reporters and neighbors as Grant was led away in handcuffs, his designer suit replaced with orange jail clothing. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms now shuffled in shackles. His empire of lies finally collapsed. Claire testified with the courage of someone who'd finally chosen right over easy. Her recordings played like a horror movie soundtrack. Grant's voice discussing murder plans, insurance payouts, and backup elimination methods with the cold efficiency of a businessman reviewing quarterly projections. He said Vanessa was becoming a liability, Claire told the packed courtroom. Said she was asking too many questions about finances, getting too independent, not grateful enough for the lifestyle he'd provided. He wanted her eliminated before she could cause real problems. Grant's high-powered legal team tried every strategy in their expensive playbook. They claimed the recordings were fabricated, that Claire was a bitter ex-girlfriend seeking revenge, that the car's sabotage was coincidental mechanical failure. But Danny Torres, the mechanic Grant had hired to tamper with the brake lines, had been arrested hours after Grant. Faced with 20 years in prison, Torres confessed everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. "Mr. Whitaker paid me 15 grand to make sure his wife's car would crash," Torres testified, his voice barely audible as shame filled the courtroom. Said it needed to look accidental, happened during bad weather when brake failure would seem natural. 25 years to life for attempted murder. Full custody to Vanessa. The mansion, the business, the hidden accounts. Everything returned to the woman who'd nearly died for Grant's greed. Justice tasted like tears of relief mixed with bitter satisfaction. Judge Rodriguez's sentencing speech cut through Grant's final attempts at manipulation like sunlight through fog. "Mr. Whitaker, in 30 years on this bench, I've seen many kinds of evil, but rarely have I encountered someone who would plan their spouse's murder with such cold calculation, then attempt to steal their child when that murder failed. You represent the worst kind of predator, one who uses love as a weapon and family as camouflage for criminal behavior." Grant tried one last performance, standing before the judge with tears he'd probably practiced in his cell. "Your Honor, I made mistakes, but I never intended for anyone to get hurt. The stress of my wife's accident, the pressure of caring for a brain-injured spouse, the financial strain." "Mr. Whitaker," Judge Rodriguez interrupted, "you planned your wife's murder 3 months before any accident occurred. You increased her life insurance policies while discussing mechanical sabotage with a hired criminal. You showed no concern for her recovery, no relief at her survival, no remorse for your attempted crime. The only thing you regret is getting caught." The gavel fell like thunder. 25 years to life for attempted murder, 15 years for conspiracy, 10 years for insurance fraud. Sentences to run consecutively, not concurrently. "Mr. Whitaker, you will spend the rest of your natural life in prison, which is less than you deserve but all that law allows. If someone who tried to destroy you finally faced real consequences, would you feel satisfied or just empty? How do you rebuild after surviving the ultimate betrayal?" Share your thoughts on justice versus healing. Grant's face crumpled as reality hit him. No more designer suits, no more mansion, no more power over anyone's life. Just decades in a cell, growing old behind bars while the family he'd tried to destroy lived free and healed without him. Additionally, Judge Rodriguez continued, "You are permanently banned from any contact with Vanessa or Mia Whitaker. Any attempt to communicate with them, directly or through third parties, will result in additional charges and extended sentences." The media called it the Phoenix Predator case. Wealthy tech executive who tried to murder his wife for insurance money, then attempted to steal their daughter when the murder plot failed. Grant's mugshot appeared on every major news outlet, his crimes detailed in articles that would follow him forever. Claire received immunity for her testimony, but faced her own consequences. Public shame, financial ruin from legal fees, and the knowledge that she'd nearly been an accessory to murder. She left Arizona the day after Grant's sentencing, seeking anonymity somewhere far from the destruction she'd helped create. When Mia asked why Daddy had tried to hurt Mommy, Vanessa found simple truth: some people's hearts get sick, baby. But the good people help the hurt people heal. It would take years, but healing was finally possible. The Scottsdale mansion where Grant had imprisoned his family with golden chains was sold, the proceeds going to Vanessa and Mia, along with restitution for their suffering. They bought a modest house in a neighborhood where children played in yards and neighbors knew each other's names. As the gavel fell and Grant was led away, Vanessa felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete safety. But safety was just the beginning. Now came the harder work of learning how to trust again, how to love again, how to live again. The real journey was just starting. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but sometimes what almost kills you makes you unstoppable. 2 years later, Vanessa stood in the conference room of the Phoenix Women's Legal Defense Center, looking out at desert mountains that had witnessed her rebirth from victim to survivor to warrior. The center bore Ruby's name, the Ruby Whitaker Foundation for Women's Rights, funded by Grant's seized assets and dedicated to helping women escape dangerous marriages before those marriages turned deadly. The Phoenix Women's Center gleamed in desert sunshine, its walls painted hopeful blue instead of hospital white. Here, Vanessa had found her calling, helping other women recognize the signs she'd missed, escape the traps she'd survived, and reclaim the power they'd forgotten they possessed. "Mrs. Chun," Vanessa said to the woman across from her desk, "you're not crazy. You're not imagining things. And you're definitely not alone." The woman, Maria, could have been Vanessa 3 years earlier. Same hollow eyes, same careful way of choosing words, same flinch when her phone buzzed with another controlling message from a husband who monitored her every move. "He tracks my car," Maria whispered. "Says it's for safety, but I know he's watching everywhere I go. He controls all the money, all the accounts. I don't even have cash for groceries without asking permission." Vanessa recognized every detail of the trap she'd escaped. The isolation disguised as protection. The financial control presented as loving provision. The systematic removal of independence until the victim believed she couldn't survive without her captor. "Maria, I'm going to tell you something that might sound impossible right now," Vanessa said, leaning forward with the intensity of someone who'd walked through hell and come back stronger. "You can leave. You can take your children and build a life where you make the decisions, control the money, and nobody tracks your movements. I know because I did it." When a new client sat across from her, bruised, broken, convinced she deserved the abuse, Vanessa saw herself 3 years earlier. "You're not crazy," she said gently. "You're not weak. You're not alone. And you're going to survive this." The foundation had grown beyond Vanessa's wildest dreams. What started as a small legal aid office had expanded into a comprehensive support system. Safe houses, financial counseling, job training, childcare, legal representation, and most importantly, proof that escape was possible. "Every woman who walks through that door," Vanessa told the documentary crew filming her story, "sees the same thing I saw 3 years ago, a system designed to protect wealth over women, power over people. But they also see something Grant never counted on: other women who refuse to disappear quietly." The documentary, titled Phoenix Rising, One Woman's Fight Against Predatory Marriage, had aired nationally the month before. Vanessa's story sparked conversations in living rooms and courtrooms across America about domestic abuse in wealthy families, about the ways money could hide cruelty, about the strength it takes to fight back when everything seems hopeless. Mia, now 9 years old, helped her mother review applications from women seeking foundation assistance. She couldn't read the legal details, but she could spot the look in photographs, the same haunted expression Vanessa had worn during those terrible months when Grant controlled their lives. "This lady looks scared like you did," Mia said, pointing to a photo attached to an intake form. "But she's going to be okay now, right? She's going to learn that she's stronger than she knows," Vanessa replied. "Just like we did." Ruby, 75 now, but still fierce as a desert storm, had become the foundation's unofficial grandmother. She greeted every new client with homemade cookies and the kind of no-nonsense love that made grown women cry with relief. "Child," she'd tell the most broken arrivals, "I raised a daughter who survived a car crash, a murder plot, and a husband who tried to steal her baby. If she can come back from that, you can come back from whatever brought you here. What would you do if your worst experience became your greatest strength? How would you use your survival story to help others? Share how you've turned pain into purpose." The foundation's success stories filled Vanessa's office. Photos of women who'd escaped abusive marriages, started new careers, raised children in safety, found love with partners who valued their strength instead of exploiting their vulnerability. Detective Martinez, now retired, volunteered as the foundation's security consultant. His experience with domestic violence cases helped identify the most dangerous situations and coordinate with law enforcement when threats escalated. "What you're doing here," he told Vanessa during one of their monthly strategy meetings, "is preventing murders. Every woman who gets help before her husband crosses that final line. That's a life saved, a family preserved, a community made safer." Mrs. Chun, their elderly neighbor turned foundation board member, had established a witness protection program for women whose cases involved wealthy, powerful abusers. Her network of retired teachers, nurses, and community volunteers provided safe havens when traditional shelters weren't secure enough. Rich men think money makes them invisible, Mrs. Chun said during a foundation fundraiser. But neighborhoods have eyes. Churches have hearts. Schools have heroes. When good people work together, no predator is too powerful to stop. The legal changes Vanessa's case had sparked were perhaps the most important legacy. Arizona now required automatic financial audits in divorce cases involving suspected abuse. Insurance companies had to report unusual policy changes to state investigators. Mechanics faced criminal liability for tampering with vehicles, even when paid by vehicle owners. Grant Whitaker thought he was smart enough to commit the perfect crime. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh told legal conferences where she spoke about the case. Instead, he exposed every loophole that allowed predators to operate with impunity. His conviction closed those loopholes for future cases. But the most profound changes were personal ones that couldn't be measured in legislation or foundation statistics. Vanessa had learned to trust again, carefully, gradually, with eyes wide open to red flags she'd once ignored. The man she was dating, Dr. James Rodriguez, was Judge Rodriguez's nephew and a trauma surgeon who understood that healing happened in stages, that trust was earned through consistency, that love meant wanting someone to grow stronger rather than more dependent. "I won't lie to you," she told women's groups where she spoke about life after abuse. "Learning to trust again is terrifying. Every kindness feels like potential manipulation. Every gesture of care triggers fear that it's a trap. But slowly, carefully, with the right person who proves their character through actions over time, it is possible to love again." Mia thrived in their new life with a resilience that amazed everyone who knew their story. She remembered her father as the man who'd locked her outside in the cold, but she also remembered her mother as the woman who'd fought impossible odds to protect her. "I'm proud of my mom," Mia told her fourth grade class during a presentation about family heroes. "She saved us from a bad person, and now she saves other families too. She's like a real-life superhero, except instead of a cape, she wears business suits and carries legal papers." The memories of Grant's betrayal would always be part of their story, but they no longer defined their future. Scars remained. Vanessa still checked locks twice, still tensed when unknown cars followed too closely, still woke sometimes from nightmares about brake failures and frozen porches. But alongside the scars grew strength, wisdom, and unshakable knowledge of what real love looked like. Some nights, Mia still had nightmares about locked doors and frozen porches. But most nights, she fell asleep to her mother's voice reading stories where brave women saved themselves and everyone lived happily, safely ever after. The Foundation's latest project was a documentary series featuring survivors who'd rebuilt their lives after escaping abusive marriages. Each episode would end with practical information, warning signs to watch for, resources available for help, legal rights that predators hoped their victims didn't know existed. "We're not just telling stories," Vanessa explained to the production team. "We're creating roadmaps. Every woman who watches these episodes and recognizes her own situation, who calls our hotline or visits our website or finds courage to leave, that's another life saved, another family protected." On quiet evenings, when the Foundation office was empty and Phoenix stretched out below her windows, Vanessa sometimes thought about the woman she'd been before the accident. Trusting, naive, willing to surrender her independence for the illusion of security. That woman had nearly died, not from car crashes or mechanical failures, but for believing that love meant making yourself smaller to fit someone else's vision of who you should be. If someone told you that love wasn't about rescue but recognition, would you believe them? If they said dignity matters more than desire, would you understand? Share what true partnership means to you. The woman she'd become understood that real love wanted you to grow stronger, not more dependent. Real partnership meant building something together where both people contributed equally and neither person controlled the other. Real security came from knowing you could survive on your own, which made choosing to share your life with someone an act of strength rather than desperation. The most important thing I learned, Vanessa wrote in her memoir, which would be published the following year, is that surviving isn't enough. You have to decide what kind of life you want after survival, what kind of person you want to become, what kind of legacy you want to leave. Grant tried to make me disappear, but instead, he helped me discover who I was meant to be. Vanessa learned that Phoenix is more than just a city name. It's a promise. No matter how completely someone tries to destroy you, no matter how thoroughly they think they've succeeded, you can always rise from the ashes stronger than before. Because the fire that was meant to consume you becomes the flame that lights your way to freedom. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you run? Or would you build something that lasts? Comment below with what you would have done in her shoes. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of their journey resonated most with you. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along.